He thought his son loved him. He was wrong. Malcolm Rhodes stood in his kitchen, carefully ironing his best blue shirt for dinner with his son. At 68, the retired architect took pride in these weekly traditions, the one constant after losing his wife years ago. The phone buzzed on the counter. Malcolm smiled, expecting Julian with some last-minute request. Instead, the screen displayed, "Mr. Grant, attorney." Malcolm's hand froze mid-iron. His lawyer never called after hours unless something was seriously wrong. The message read, "Call me immediately. It's about Julian." Those 5 words made Malcolm's stomach drop. Why would his lawyer contact him about his own son? Malcolm's mind raced through possibilities. Was Julian hurt? In legal trouble? The iron hissed against the shirt, leaving a scorch mark he didn't notice. He dialed with trembling fingers, the phone feeling unusually heavy in his hand. "Malcolm," Mr. Grant answered immediately. "I'm glad you called back so quickly." "What's happened to Julian?" Malcolm asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing's happened to him," Mr. Grant replied, his tone grave. "It's what he's doing to you that concerns me." Malcolm lowered himself onto a kitchen chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 68 years. "I don't understand." "Malcolm, I received some documents today, financial records, legal filings, things you need to know about before you see Julian tonight." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. "Tell me," Malcolm finally said, "have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were plotting against you the whole time? What would you do if that person was your own child?" Mr. Grant's voice came through the phone, each word hitting Malcolm like a physical blow. "Julian has been emptying your accounts, Malcolm. Slowly, methodically. Over $200,000 gone in the last 8 months. Malcolm gripped the kitchen counter. "That's impossible. Julian wouldn't—" "There's more," Mr. Grant continued. "He's filed a petition with the court to have you declared mentally incompetent. The hearing is scheduled for next month." The room seemed to tilt. Malcolm's son, his only child, was trying to take control of his life, his decisions, his money. "How?" Malcolm managed. "Forged signatures, Malcolm, on bank transfers, power of attorney documents, medical releases. He's been building a paper trail, making it look like you've been slipping mentally. Doctor's appointments you never attended have notes about your confusion and memory lapses." Malcolm thought of the weekly dinners, Julian's sudden interest in his finances, the casual questions about his health. "Why would he do this?" Malcolm whispered. "The petition mentions your estate specifically, the Rhodes building downtown, your investment portfolio, the lake house, everything you've built over your lifetime." Malcolm remembered teaching Julian to ride a bike, helping with college applications, standing proud at his graduation, the memory of Julian's small hand in his own as they walked to the park decades ago. All lies, all manipulation. "What happens if he succeeds?" Malcolm asked. "He gets everything. You get a managed care facility with an allowance he controls." Malcolm's grief transformed, hardening into something else entirely, something cold and focused. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice steadier. "You have choices," Mr. Grant said. "We can fight this legally. We have evidence of the forgeries. But Malcolm, you need to be careful. Julian doesn't know we've discovered this yet." Malcolm looked at the clock. 2 hours until dinner with Julian. "I want to see his face," Malcolm said. I want to look in his eyes when he lies to me tonight. Malcolm, that might not be wise. I've spent my life building things, Mr. Grant. Now, I need to know exactly what I'm tearing down. Would you confront your betrayer immediately or play along to gather more evidence? The choice Malcolm makes next will change everything. The dinner table became a battlefield that night, with smiles as weapons and questions as ammunition. Malcolm arrived at Julian's modern downtown apartment precisely at 7. He'd spent the drive rehearsing what to say, how to act normal while his world collapsed around him. Julian opened the door with that familiar grin, the same smile Malcolm had photographed at birthdays, graduations, and fishing trips. Now, it looked like a mask. "Dad, right on time as always," Julian said, ushering him inside. Malcolm noticed everything now. The new Italian leather sofa, the expensive artwork, the designer watch on Julian's wrist, all paid for with his money, his life's work. "Nice watch," Malcolm commented casually. Julian glanced down. "Just a little something I treated myself to. Work's been good." Lie number 1, Malcolm thought. The apartment smelled of garlic and wine. Julian had prepared Malcolm's favorite pasta dish. Another calculated move. They sat across from each other, Julian pouring wine while chatting about office politics and weekend plans. Malcolm watched his son talk, wondering how long Julian had been planning this betrayal. Was it years? Had he always seen his father as nothing but a wallet with an expiration date? "How are you feeling lately, Dad?" Julian asked, his voice dripping with fake concern. "You seemed a bit confused about the date when we talked last week." Malcolm remembered that call perfectly. He hadn't been confused about anything. "I'm feeling very clear-headed these days," Malcolm replied, meeting his son's eyes. "Actually, I had an interesting call today." Julian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Oh?" "From Mr. Grant." The color drained from Julian's face so quickly it was almost comical. His mask slipped, revealing panic beneath. "What did he want?" Julian asked, trying to sound casual. Malcolm placed his napkin on the table. "He wanted to discuss some unusual activity with my accounts and a certain petition filed with the court." Julian's eyes darted to the door as if calculating an escape route. "Dad, I can explain." "Please do," Malcolm said quietly. "Explain why my son is trying to rob me of everything I've built. Explain the forged signatures. Explain why you're trying to lock me away." Julian's face hardened, the pretense evaporating completely. "You were never going to give me what I deserved," he hissed. "You spent your life building an empire, and for what? To die with it? I'm your only son, and yet you act like I should wait until you're gone. I'm done waiting." The truth hung between them like a physical thing, ugly, raw, and irreversible. "I gave you everything," Malcolm whispered. Julian laughed coldly. "No, Dad. You gave me crumbs from your table. Now I'm taking the whole meal." Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you loved and seen a complete stranger staring back? What would you do next? Behind every betrayal is a shadow, and Malcolm was about to discover his son's shadow had a name. Malcolm left Julian's apartment that night with his world shattered, but what he didn't know was that Julian wasn't working alone. The next morning, Malcolm met with Mr. Grant in his downtown office. The lawyer spread documents across his mahogany desk, bank statements, legal filings, and surveillance photos. "Julian's been meeting regularly with this woman," Mr. Grant said, pointing to a photo of Julian sitting at an outdoor cafe with an elegant blonde woman. Her name is Karina Voss. She's a financial advisor with a questionable history. Malcolm studied the photo. The woman was leaning close to Julian, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. "We've traced several of the account transfers to her firm," Mr. Grant continued. "She's the architect of this plan, Malcolm. She's done this before with other clients' family members." Malcolm felt a strange relief. Perhaps Julian had been manipulated, led astray by this woman. "There's more," Mr. Grant said hesitantly. "Karina has another connection you should know about." He slid another photo across the desk. Malcolm's heart stopped. The photo showed Karina embracing a man Malcolm knew all too well, Victor Hale, his late wife's brother. "Victor?" Malcolm whispered. "They've been involved for at least 2 years," Mr. Grant confirmed, "and Victor has been meeting with Julian, too." The pieces clicked into place. Victor had always resented Malcolm for marrying his sister, claiming Malcolm had stolen her away. Even after her death, Victor maintained a cold distance, showing up at the funeral only to leave without speaking to Malcolm. "So this isn't just about money," Malcolm said slowly. "It's about revenge." "It appears so," Mr. Grant agreed. "They're working together to strip you of everything, your money, your dignity, your freedom." Malcolm stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Among those buildings stood the Rhodes Building, his crowning achievement as an architect. Julian and Victor wanted to take that from him, too. "What's their endgame?" Malcolm asked. "Based on these documents, they plan to have you declared incompetent, move you to Green Meadows Care Facility, sell your properties, and liquidate your investments." Malcolm turned back to Mr. Grant, something new hardening in his eyes. "They think I'm just a helpless old man," he said quietly. "That's their first mistake." "What do you want to do?" Mr. Grant asked. "I want to show them what happens when you corner an architect," Malcolm replied. "Because no one knows more about building or demolishing than I do. Would you fight back immediately or pretend to be defeated while planning your revenge?" Malcolm's next move will shock everyone involved. Sometimes, to win the war, you must first appear to lose the battle. Malcolm Rhodes had built skyscrapers that withstood hurricanes. Now, he would build something else, the perfect trap. "I need to appear vulnerable," Malcolm told Mr. Grant during their strategy session. "Let Julian and his partners think they're winning." The plan was risky but calculated. Malcolm would play the role of a declining old man, confused, forgetful, and increasingly dependent. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he would document everything and prepare his counterattack. When Julian called the next day, Malcolm answered with a slightly trembling voice. "Dad, are you okay? You sound tired." "Oh, Julian," Malcolm said, adding a deliberate pause. "I'm just— What day is it again?" He could almost hear Julian's excitement through the phone. "It's Wednesday, Dad. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation. I was upset, but I only want what's best for you." "Of course, son," Malcolm replied, forcing warmth into his voice. "I trust you completely." Over the next 3 weeks, Malcolm played his part perfectly. He missed appointments he'd secretly rescheduled. He called Julian at odd hours, asking confused questions. He shuffled when they met for coffee, left his wallet at home, and repeated stories he'd already told. All while Mr. Grant worked tirelessly behind the scenes, documenting Julian's meetings with Karina and Victor, tracking the money trail, and preparing legal countermeasures. They're accelerating their timeline, Mr. Grant warned during a secret meeting at Malcolm's home. Julian has filed an emergency hearing for next week. They paid 2 doctors to testify about your mental decline. Malcolm nodded calmly. Good. Let them think I'm falling apart. That night, Malcolm sat alone in his study, looking at old family photos. Julian as a toddler, balanced on Malcolm's shoulders. Julian's high school graduation. The fishing trip where they'd caught nothing but had laughed for hours. Had it all been a lie? Or had something changed his son along the way? Malcolm placed the photos in a drawer. It didn't matter now. The time for sentiment was over. The game is set, he whispered to himself. Now we play. Have you ever pretended to be weaker than you are, just to see who would take advantage of you? Malcolm's strategy was about to pay off in ways no one expected. The courtroom fell silent as the frail old man transformed before their eyes. The emergency competency hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Julian arrived early with Karina and 2 medical experts all dressed impeccably. Victor lurked in the back row trying to remain inconspicuous. Malcolm shuffled in last, leaning heavily on a cane he didn't need, wearing clothes slightly too large, hair uncombed. He played the part perfectly, the confused elderly man, exactly as Julian had described in his petition. Julian barely concealed his smile as Malcolm appeared to struggle finding his seat. Judge Eleanor Winters presided, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench. We're here to determine if Malcolm Rhodes requires a court-appointed guardian due to diminished capacity, she announced. Julian's attorney presented first, outlining Malcolm's concerning behavior, missed appointments, confusion about dates, poor financial decisions. The 2 doctors testified about Malcolm's cognitive decline based on evaluations Malcolm had deliberately failed. Throughout it all, Malcolm stared vacantly, occasionally looking confused, exactly what Julian wanted the court to see. When Julian took the stand, he spoke with practiced concern. "I love my father," he said, voice breaking on cue, "but he needs help managing his affairs. Last week, he couldn't remember where he parked his car." Judge Winters nodded sympathetically, then turned to Malcolm's side. "Mr. Grant, does your client wish to respond to these claims?" Mr. Grant stood. "Yes, Your Honor. But first, we'd like to submit evidence." He handed the clerk a thick folder. "These are bank records showing systematic theft from Mr. Rhodes's accounts, all bearing forged signatures. We've included the forensic handwriting analysis confirming the forgeries." Julian's face paled. "Additionally," Mr. Grant continued, "we have surveillance photos documenting meetings between Julian Rhodes, Karina Voss, and Victor Hale, planning this scheme." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. "And finally," Mr. Grant said, "we'd like to call Malcolm Rhodes to testify." Malcolm stood, straightening to his full height. He combed his fingers through his hair, adjusted his clothes, and walked confidently to the witness stand, without his cane. The transformation stunned the courtroom. Gone was the confused old man. In his place stood a sharp, dignified gentleman with clear eyes and a steady voice. "Your Honor," Malcolm said clearly, "I've been playing a role for the past month. Every confused moment was documented and planned. I have recordings of my son discussing his plans to have me committed while he liquidates my estate." Julian jumped to his feet. "He's lying!" Judge Winters banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Rhodes." Malcolm looked directly at his son. "I built my reputation on solid foundations, Julian. You should have remembered that before trying to tear it down. What would you do if you caught someone you loved in a lie this massive?" The tables had turned, but Malcolm's revenge was just beginning. The strongest buildings need support from all sides, and Malcolm was building a case that would stand against any storm. The courtroom victory was just the beginning. Malcolm knew that to truly protect himself and ensure justice, he needed more than just his lawyer's help. He needed a network of allies who could testify to his mental competence and Julian's deception. His first stop was his longtime neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Patel, a retired judge herself. "I've watched that boy grow up," Mrs. Patel said, shaking her head as Malcolm explained the situation. "To think he'd turn on you like this. I've seen him coming and going at odd hours, bringing expensive things into his apartment. I wondered where the money was coming from." Malcolm nodded. "Would you be willing to sign a statement about what you've observed?" "I'll do better than that," she replied firmly. "I'll testify if needed." Next, Malcolm reached out to Dr. James Chen, his physician of 20 years. "Your medical records show perfect cognitive health, Malcolm," Dr. Chen confirmed, reviewing his file. "Your last assessment was excellent for a man half your age. I'd be happy to provide official documentation contradicting these paid medical opinions." The most surprising ally came in the form of Melissa Winters, Julian's ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago. "Julian talked about your money constantly," she revealed over coffee. "He called it his future fortune and resented that you were hoarding it. When I suggested he build his own wealth, he laughed and said, 'Why bother when yours was just sitting there?'" Each conversation added another brick to Malcolm's wall of defense. Malcolm's old colleagues from his architecture firm provided statements about recent consulting work he'd done, demonstrating his sharp mind and attention to detail. His bank manager documented unusual account access attempts that didn't match Malcolm's signature or usual banking patterns. Mr. Grant compiled everything meticulously. "We're not just defending you anymore, Malcolm," he explained. "We're building a case against Julian, Karina, and Victor for attempted fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft." Malcolm looked at the growing stack of evidence on the table between them. "All these years," he said quietly, "I thought I was building a legacy for Julian. Instead, I need to protect it from him." "What hurts most?" Mr. Grant asked gently. Malcolm's eyes grew distant. "That he thought I wouldn't fight back. Have you ever discovered unexpected allies when you needed them most?" Malcolm was about to find support from the most unlikely source. When a ship starts sinking, the rats are always first to abandon it. 3 days after the failed court hearing, Malcolm received an unexpected call from Mr. Grant. "You need to come to my office immediately," the lawyer said, his voice tense with excitement. "Karina Voss is here. She wants to talk." Malcolm arrived to find Karina sitting rigidly in Mr. Grant's office, her designer outfit and perfect makeup contrasting with her nervous expression. She didn't meet Malcolm's eyes as he entered. "Ms. Voss has approached us with an offer," Mr. Grant explained. "She's willing to provide testimony against Julian and Victor in exchange for immunity." Malcolm studied the woman who had helped orchestrate his downfall. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Karina finally looked up. Julian is planning to pin everything on me. I found emails between him and Victor discussing how I would be the fall person if things went wrong." Her polished voice cracked slightly. "They're setting me up." "So now you want to set them up first," Malcolm observed coldly. She nodded. "I have everything. Dates, times, recordings of meetings. Julian forged your signatures while Victor created the fake medical reports. I can prove it was their plan from the beginning." Mr. Grant looked at Malcolm. "Her testimony would guarantee criminal charges against both of them." Malcolm considered the woman before him. "And what do you get?" "A written agreement that you won't press charges against me," she replied quickly. "I was just the financial advisor. They were the masterminds." Malcolm almost laughed at her attempt to rewrite history. "You expect me to believe that?" "It doesn't matter what you believe," Karina said, desperation edging into her voice. "What matters is what I can prove about them. Julian has already moved most of your money offshore. Without my help, you'll never get it back." Malcolm and Mr. Grant stepped outside to confer privately. "She's lying about her involvement," Malcolm said immediately. "Of course she is," Mr. Grant agreed. "But she's also scared. Julian and Victor have clearly turned on her, which means she'll give us everything to save herself. Can we trust anything she provides?" "We can verify it independently," Mr. Grant assured him, "and having her flip on them creates division in their ranks. They'll start blaming each other." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Accept her offer, but don't tell her everything we already know. I want to see what version of the story she tells." As they returned to the office, Malcolm watched Karina's relieved expression with grim satisfaction. She thought she was saving herself, but she had no idea what was coming next. What would you do if your enemy's ally suddenly offered to help you? Malcolm knew this betrayal was just another opportunity. But who was really betraying whom? The best trap is the one your enemy walks into while thinking they've escaped another. Karina Voss sat confidently in the district attorney's office, her statement nearly complete. For 2 hours, she had painted herself as an unwitting participant in Julian and Victor's scheme, claiming she had only recently discovered their true intentions. "I was just doing my job as a financial advisor," she insisted, dabbing at non-existent tears. "Julian told me his father wanted to simplify his estate." "I had no idea the signatures were forged." The district attorney nodded sympathetically while taking notes. Malcolm and Mr. Grant exchanged glances, waiting for the perfect moment. "Ms. Voss," Mr. Grant said casually, "could you explain these phone records showing daily calls between you and Victor Hale dating back 3 years? Karina's pen froze mid-signature. "We're colleagues." "Interesting," Malcolm said, sliding a folder across the table, "because these hotel receipts and restaurant bills suggest a much closer relationship." Color drained from Karina's face as photos spilled out. Her and Victor embracing, entering hotel rooms, sharing intimate dinners. "That's personal," she stammered. "It has nothing to do with—" "And these offshore account transfers," Mr. Grant continued, producing more documents. "All initiated from your personal laptop, moving funds from my clients' accounts through shell companies you created years before meeting Julian." The district attorney's sympathetic expression hardened. "Ms. Voss, did you just lie under oath?" "Wait," she said, panic rising in her voice. "This isn't what we agreed to." "We agreed you would tell the truth," Malcolm replied calmly. You chose not to. The district attorney closed her notebook. Ms. Voss, based on this evidence, you appear to be not just a participant, but an architect of this fraud. Your immunity deal required complete honesty. You don't understand, Karina pleaded, looking desperately at Malcolm. Victor approached me first. He hated you for years, said you stole his sister, then let her die. Malcolm's composure cracked slightly at the mention of his late wife. My wife had cancer, he said quietly. I didn't let her die. That's not how Victor tells it, Karina shot back, abandoning all pretense. He's been planning this for decades. Julian was just an easy tool, a greedy son who never appreciated what he had. The district attorney signaled to the officer at the door. Ms. Voss, you're now facing charges of conspiracy, fraud, perjury, and elder abuse. Officer, please take her into custody. As Karina was led away, shouting accusations against Victor and Julian, Malcolm felt no satisfaction, only a deep, hollow ache. Are you all right? Mr. Grant asked. No, Malcolm answered honestly, but I will be when this is finished. Have you ever caught someone in a lie so big they couldn't possibly talk their way out of it? Malcolm had just shattered Karina's escape plan, but the real target remained his own son. Reputation takes a lifetime to build and seconds to destroy. Julian was about to learn this lesson the hard way. News travels fast in close-knit professional communities. By the end of the week, Julian Rhodes' name had become toxic throughout the city. The story broke first in the business section of the local paper. Prominent businessman accused of defrauding father. The article detailed the failed competency hearing and Karina's arrest, with quotes from the district attorney about one of the most calculated cases of elder exploitation she had ever seen. Julian's phone stopped ringing. Lunch invitations disappeared. His office parking space was reassigned. Mr. Rhodes won't be coming in anymore, his former boss told staff after terminating Julian's employment. The company cannot be associated with these allegations. Malcolm watched from a distance as his son's carefully constructed life crumbled. The expensive apartment Julian could no longer afford. The country club membership revoked. Former friends crossing the street to avoid him. He's trying to contact you, Mr. Grant informed Malcolm. He's called my office 12 times today. Malcolm shook his head. I'm not ready. The social fallout was just the beginning. The criminal investigation expanded daily as more evidence emerged. 3 banks froze Julian's accounts. His passport was flagged. Former clients came forward with stories of questionable financial advice and missing funds. Victor Hale, meanwhile, had vanished. His condo stood empty, his phone disconnected. But Malcolm knew he wouldn't get far. The authorities have flagged his accounts and identification, Mr. Grant confirmed. It's only a matter of time. At a charity event Malcolm had supported for years, people approached him with awkward sympathy. "How are you holding up?" asked Margaret Chin, a longtime friend. "I can't imagine what you're going through, betrayed by your own son." Malcolm nodded politely but offered little. These people had dined with Julian, invited him to their homes, treated him like family. None had seen through his mask. That night, alone in his study, Malcolm received a text from an unknown number. "Dad, please, I need to talk to you. They're going to arrest me tomorrow. Please help me." Malcolm stared at the message for a long time before turning off his phone without replying. What would you do if the child you raised begged for your help after betraying you. Malcolm's next move would determine not just Julian's fate, but his own ability to ever find peace again. The glass between them was only an inch thick, but it might as well have been a mile. Malcolm sat in the cold metal chair, facing the visitation booth where his son would soon appear. The county detention center smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. A guard had explained the rules. 30 minutes, no physical contact, all conversations recorded. 3 days had passed since Julian's arrest. The charges were serious: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, elder abuse, and grand theft. Bail had been denied due to flight risk. When Julian finally appeared on the other side of the glass, Malcolm barely recognized him. Gone were the designer clothes and confident smile. This Julian wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfect hair lay flat and unwashed. Julian grabbed the phone receiver, his hand shaking. "Dad, you came." Malcolm picked up his own receiver, saying nothing at first, just studying the stranger who was his son. "Why did you come?" Julian asked, his voice cracking. "To gloat?" "I came to understand," Malcolm replied simply. Julian laughed bitterly. "What's to understand? I'm greedy. I'm impatient. I wanted what was mine without waiting for you to die. Mystery solved." "What was yours?" Malcolm repeated, the words like stones. "You think everything I built was automatically yours?" "I'm your only son," Julian snapped, a flash of the old entitlement breaking through. "Who else would it go to?" Malcolm leaned forward. "It would have gone to you, Julian, all of it. I was already planning to transfer management of the properties to you next year. You were in my will for everything." Julian's face went slack with shock. "What? You never asked. You just took." Tears welled in Julian's eyes. "Dad, I didn't know. Karina said—" "Don't," Malcolm cut him off. "Don't blame others for your choices." Julian wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Can you help me, please? My lawyer says with your support, we might get a plea deal." Malcolm studied his son's desperate face. "You thought you could take everything from me, Julian, but now you've lost everything: your freedom, your reputation, and the trust of the only person who ever truly stood by you. That's the price of betrayal." Julian slammed his fist against the glass. "So that's it? You're just going to let me rot in here?" "No," Malcolm said, standing up. "I'm going to let you face the consequences of your actions, like I taught you when you were a boy, remember?" As Malcolm turned to leave, Julian called after him, voice breaking, "Dad, please, I'm sorry." Malcolm paused, but didn't turn around. "So am I, Julian. So am I." Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love, knowing it was the right thing to do? Malcolm's hardest test wasn't fighting his son's betrayal, it was deciding what to do after winning. Some men build monuments of stone and steel. Malcolm Rhodes decided to build something stronger, a legacy of justice. 2 weeks after visiting Julian in jail, Malcolm sat in Mr. Grant's office, finalizing his new will. The document before him represented months of careful planning and soul-searching. "Are you certain about this?" Mr. Grant asked, reviewing the final draft. "It's quite a departure from your previous arrangements." Malcolm nodded firmly. "More certain than I've been about anything in years." The new will completely disinherited Julian. Instead, Malcolm's considerable estate, the downtown Rhodes building, his investment portfolio, the lake house, and all other assets would be transferred into the newly established Rhodes Foundation for Family Justice. The foundation will provide legal support to elderly victims of financial abuse, Malcolm explained, and fund scholarships for students raised by single parents, like I raised Julian. Mr. Grant nodded approvingly. It's a worthy cause. But what about personal items? Family heirlooms? Malcolm had considered this carefully. Julian's childhood photos and my wife's jewelry will be held in trust. If he completes his sentence and demonstrates genuine rehabilitation, he can petition the foundation board for their return. And the lake house? Mr. Grant asked. You always said that was Julian's favorite place. Malcolm looked out the window, remembering summer days teaching Julian to fish, winter evenings by the fireplace telling stories. The lake house will become a retreat center for families healing from betrayal, he said quietly, a place where broken trust might begin to mend. As they signed the documents, Malcolm felt a weight lifting. For months, his every action had been a response to Julian's betrayal. Now, finally, he was building something new, something that would outlast his pain. There's one more thing, Malcolm said, pulling a sealed envelope from his jacket. This letter is for Julian. I'd like it delivered after my death, along with the news about the foundation. Mr. Grant accepted the envelope. May I ask what it says? Malcolm smiled sadly. It says, I forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine. And it explains that while he couldn't inherit my money, he still has the chance to inherit something more valuable, the knowledge that it's never too late to rebuild what you've destroyed. Do you really believe he can change? Mr. Grant asked. I have to, Malcolm replied. Otherwise, what was the point of any of this? If you could rewrite your legacy after betrayal, would you choose revenge or redemption? Malcolm chose both. Justice now, with the possibility of forgiveness later. Even the most careful criminals make one critical mistake. Victor Hales was underestimating Malcolm Rhodes. While Julian awaited trial and Karina negotiated a plea deal, Victor Hale remained a ghost. Law enforcement had flagged his passport and frozen his known accounts, but the man himself had vanished 3 weeks earlier. What authorities didn't know, but Malcolm did, was that Victor had always kept an escape plan ready. Malcolm's late wife had once mentioned her brother's paranoia stash, emergency cash, fake identification, and a yacht docked in Florida under a company name. He's heading for the Caribbean, Malcolm told Detective Rivera during their meeting at the police station. He has connections in St. Lucia. The detective looked skeptical. How can you be so sure? Malcolm placed a worn photo album on the desk. My wife kept this. It's full of family vacations. Victor took them to St. Lucia every summer as children. He always talked about retiring there. Detective Rivera flipped through the album, pausing at photos of a younger Victor standing proudly beside a small beach house. This is helpful, but not enough for an international manhunt. Check the deed records, Malcolm suggested. The house was purchased under the name Hale Ventures 30 years ago. I'd bet anything he's heading there now. Malcolm's hunch paid off. Within 48 hours, authorities confirmed the property still existed under the same ownership. International alerts were issued. 3 days later, Malcolm received the call he'd been waiting for. We got him, Detective Rivera announced. Customs stopped him in Miami, trying to board a private charter to St. Lucia. He was traveling under the name Vincent Harper, with over $200,000 in cash. Malcolm closed his eyes, relief washing over him. Did he say anything? just demanded his lawyer. But his face when we mentioned your name? Priceless. That evening, Malcolm watched the news report of Victor's arrest. The camera caught Victor being led into the courthouse, his face twisted with rage when he spotted Malcolm waiting on the steps. "This isn't over, Rhodes!" Victor shouted before officers pulled him inside. Malcolm simply nodded in acknowledgement. "No, it's not," he whispered to himself, "but it will be soon." Have you ever watched someone who thought they were untouchable finally face justice? Malcolm had closed the net on all three conspirators, but the final chapter of justice was yet to be written. In courtroom 302, three separate fates were sealed with the same gavel strike. The trials and sentencing hearings stretched over 4 months. Malcolm attended every session, sitting quietly in the back row, watching justice unfold with patient determination. Karina Voss was the first to learn her fate. Despite her attempted deal, her lies under oath and the mountain of evidence against her resulted in 7 years for fraud, conspiracy, and elder exploitation. As the sentence was announced, she turned to glare at Malcolm, but he simply held her gaze until she looked away. Victor Hale maintained his innocence until the end, claiming he was merely helping his nephew protect family assets. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. His sentence, 9 years with no possibility of early parole, reflected both the severity of his crimes and his flight attempt. "You stole my sister from me!" Victor spat at Malcolm after the verdict. "I was just taking back what should have been mine." Malcolm shook his head. "She wasn't property, Victor. She was a person who made her own choices." Julian's case was the most complex. His defense team argued that he had been manipulated by Karina and Victor, playing on his insecurities and resentment. Character witnesses spoke of his previous good standing and community involvement. Malcolm was called to testify during sentencing. The courtroom fell silent as he took the stand. "Mr. Rhodes," the judge asked, "do you have a recommendation regarding your son's sentence?" Malcolm looked directly at Julian for the first time since the prison visit. "I believe in consequences," he said clearly, "but I also believe in redemption. My son should serve time for what he did, but with opportunity for rehabilitation." The judge nodded thoughtfully before delivering her decision. 10 years, with eligibility for parole after 5, plus full restitution of all stolen funds. As Julian was led away, he paused beside Malcolm. "Why didn't you ask for the maximum?" he whispered. "Because you're still my son," Malcolm replied simply, "and I still remember the boy you were before you became the man who betrayed me." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Malcolm for comments. "How does it feel to see justice served?" one shouted. Malcolm considered the question carefully. "Justice isn't about feeling good," he finally answered. "It's about restoring balance. Today, balance has been restored. If someone betrayed you completely, could you still show them mercy?" Malcolm's journey wasn't about revenge. It was about justice tempered with the faintest hope for redemption. Victory tastes different when you're dining alone at a table meant for two. 1 year after Julian's sentencing, Malcolm Rhodes sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past his window, golden in the fading light. On his desk sat a photograph of his late wife, her smile forever frozen in time. The Rhodes Foundation for Family Justice was now fully operational, already helping dozens of elderly victims reclaim stolen assets and dignity. The downtown building that bore his name housed the foundation's offices, where a team of dedicated lawyers worked pro bono for those who couldn't afford legal help. Malcolm picked up the photograph, tracing his wife's face with his fingertip. "I protected what we built," he whispered. He couldn't take that away. The house felt emptier now, the silence deeper. Malcolm had won, his reputation restored, his assets secured, the conspirators punished, yet victory had come at the cost of his only family. Earlier that day, he'd received his first letter from Julian. For weeks, Malcolm had left it unopened on his desk, unsure if he wanted to read whatever excuses or accusations it might contain. Finally, as evening fell, he broke the seal. The letter was brief. "Dad, I have no right to ask forgiveness. I won't insult you by trying. All I can say is that I think about what I did every day. The man I became is not someone I recognize anymore. I'm taking classes here, psychology, trying to understand myself, trying to understand why I valued money over the only person who ever truly loved me. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. Julian." No excuses, no blame, just the faintest beginning of accountability. Malcolm folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. Then he picked up a pen and blank paper. He stared at the empty page for a long time before finally writing, "Julian, I received your letter. Keep taking those classes. The foundation is doing good work. I'm enclosing a photo of the lake in autumn. Dad." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps it was the first brick in rebuilding something that had been completely destroyed. Malcolm sealed the envelope, knowing that some victories aren't measured by what you win, but by what you choose not to lose forever. Would you leave the door open, even just a crack, for someone who betrayed you completely? Malcolm's story wasn't about perfect endings. It was about finding peace amid the pieces of a shattered relationship.